is officially trade season in the NBA as of yesterday, December 15th. About 90% of the NBA is officially eligible to be traded. A lot of players having their trade restrictions lifted as of that date. So, on today's show, we're going to do a little bit of a trade season primer, go through some of the top players that are out there on the market, some guys that I think make a lot of sense for Philadelphia, what players could be on the block for the Sixers, and a trade that I think the Sixers should make today if they want to get serious about contending in the Eastern Conference. Got a lot to get to here on today's show. And guys, this is why, if you're not already, you subscribe to the channel. If you want the best trade coverage you will find, the best Sixers coverage you'll find all year round right here on YouTube, lock us in, hit that sub button. The best part is it is 100% free. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. So let's start kind of just taking an overview here at the Sixers at this point in time, right? As we sit here on Tuesday, December 16th, currently sitting at an 14-11 record, which puts them at 6th in the East, although 3 through really 9 in the East right now are only separated by a couple of games. They're currently $1 million under the first apron and about $13 million under the second apron. So they are currently in the luxury tax, something to monitor. Biggest needs I see right now for the Sixers, size is still an issue, right? Embiid's getting back in there a little bit, looking a little bit better. But regardless, Sixers could use another interior presence behind him because although Drummond's been very good, not necessarily this dominant interior presence. And Sixers did some things to try to remedy that, but still a little bit of an issue. And I think perimeter defense is a pretty big need for the Sixers. Now, Paul George coming back has helped that out quite a bit, but it can't just be, at mid-30s Paul George as your top perimeter defender. So I think the Sixers could really benefit by having one more above average perimeter defender, someone who can guard guards, guard wings as well, which is going to be big for Philadelphia as they head into hopefully a playoff run here in a few months. Now, let's start on the Sixers side of things, talking about what assets they have to trade, what players they could trade away. Because, of course, when you're talking making trades, there'll be some picks in there, but probably including a player or two in some of these deals. So who could be shipped out for Philadelphia? Now, you talk about the big moves and the big money, obviously matching salaries for contracts. You're going to bring up Joel Embiid. You're going to bring up Paul George. But with Embiid, I just don't see a world where he does get traded this year. He's looked a little bit better as of late, coming off the injury the past few games, starting to look a little bit more like himself. That Atlanta Hawks game, I thought he was moving around really well. And look, it's a huge contract with the injury history. I just don't see another team willing to take that on at this point with still, 3 years remaining, including this year, on his contract. And then Paul George as well, although he has been playing better and he's one less year left on his contract than Embiid, still making a ton of money, an older player that, again, I have a tough time seeing a team willing to take on Paul George. So although, we could talk about potential trades with these guys and moves that could see the Sixers move Embiid or Paul George, realistically, I just don't see that happening at any time this season. Maybe in the offseason, who knows, but not for this trade deadline. So that brings me to the guys that I think are most likely to be traded if the Sixers do want to make some type of move at this year's deadline. Now, Kelly Oubre has been a guy that we have talked about quite a bit, even going back to the offseason, of being a potential trade candidate. And it makes sense given his contract situation, expiring contract, making $8.3 million, who's having really a career year at this point, really the only kind of mid-tier salary Philadelphia honestly has, because, again, you're not giving away Embiid or Paul George, like I just said, and you're obviously not trading away Tyrese Maxey. So to really get any kind of salary, it's kind of got to be Kelly Oubre. But I don't want to trade Kelly Oubre right now if I'm the Sixers. I think the way he had played to start the season, he's too valuable with what he does on both sides of the ball. So unless it's a very clear and obvious upgrade, I do not want to trade Kelly Oubre. Let me make that very clear, because some people I know are going to say, oh, Oubre's a trade candidate. Technically, he is, but I'd be very against trading him unless you get something miles ahead of who Oubre is as a player. Andre Drummond, also a trade candidate, given his salary at $5 million. And, the Sixers, with what they have behind Embiid, it's really just Drummond and Bona. And Bona's been really inconsistent this year, a little bit disappointing. I don't think you can really trade Drummond either right now. Now, maybe there's a move where you can get another player back to be that backup big man if, Drummond getting up there in age a little bit and expiring contract could move him. But I, again, think you don't really want to move off of Drummond right now because he is having a bounce back year. And who else do you have behind Embiid right now if you don't get a replacement back in a Drummond trade? And that brings us to maybe the most intriguing trade candidate and trade piece for Philadelphia. That is Jared McCain. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about Jared McCain on the back half of the show. But look, having a pretty disappointing year. Now, again, coming off the major injury, he was going to start slow. It's not a surprise that he's struggling to start this season, given having to overcome the meniscus surgery, had the thumb injury as well at the beginning of the year. It's no surprise that he struggled a little bit to find his shot. Nick Nurse doesn't really trust him 100% in these lineups, especially defensively. Hasn't looked totally comfortable with the ball in his hands outside of some few good moments here and there. And he's still a young player. Showed a lot of flashes last year. Obviously not making a lot of money. I think he'd be a guy that would have the most value, unless you're trading like a VJ Edgecombe, which you're not doing, to other teams when it comes to these trade talks. So an interesting name to monitor. I'm very curious what the Sixers will end up deciding to do with McCain, because you have Maxey, you have Edgecombe, you have Grimes. How does he really fit in to the future of this team? Now, they don't have to decide on that at this deadline, but maybe the Sixers feel like there's a direction they can go in, and McCain is the best option they have to get some real talent back. Now let's start talking about some trade targets, right? And we'll kind of go in tiers here, starting with the stars that are available, that are said to be available, at least on the market. Obviously, not all these guys will be traded, but a good handful of these star players are going to end up on new teams. Of course, we know about all the Giannis drama. I'm pretty sure he will be traded. Same goes for Anthony Davis, right? We've heard a lot of rumors surrounding his name. I don't think Lauri Markkanen does end up getting traded, but his name is always thrown in there every single year, it seems like. Trae Young's an interesting one. Hawks have been playing really well without him, but I think they want to see what he looks like with this roster because he has been hurt for much of the season. Domantas Sabonis, Kings are said to be open for business on a lot of their veterans, and Sabonis, certainly could use a change of scenery, having a little bit of a down year, but still a really good player on a bad team. Ja Morant seems like he's as good as gone from the Memphis Grizzlies. He's had an awful year, and there's been some rifts between him and the coaching staff over there. Zion also kind of seems like he could be on his way out. Now, his value is always tough to determine because, great player when he's healthy. He's never healthy. What could the Pelicans really get for him? I think a change of scenery could be good for Zion as well. And then LaMelo Ball, Hornets have some interesting young players, Con Knupel, Brandon Miller. LaMelo just doesn't really play a winning brand of basketball. There's been some rumors that they are willing to move on from him as well. So if you want to make a big splash move, these are kind of the names out there. But I'll have to be honest, I don't see Philadelphia making a huge big-time splash for Giannis, for an Anthony Davis, for somebody else on that list. Again, given the fact that I don't think Embiid or Paul George have all that much value, and just looking at the roster and the way it's constructed right now, I would be surprised if, although Morey does like to make these big moves, he likes to do more off-season moves, right? Sixers don't often make too many huge in-season trades. Of course, they made the James Harden trade not too long ago, but I just don't really see it in the cards right now for Philadelphia. I think they will make a move, but I don't think a huge trade for a star where you're trading a bunch of your depth, you're trading either Embiid or Paul George, makes a lot of sense, and I don't think it's the direction the Sixers going. So we kind of take it down a notch from true superstars to players that I think would be dream targets for Philadelphia if they can get their hands on them. There's 3 guys I have in this list. It could be more depending on how you view certain players. Trey Murphy and Herb Jones of the Pelicans, and then Tari Eason of the Houston Rockets. If you can get any of those 3 guys, I would consider it an absolute massive win at the trade deadline. We'll start with Trey Murphy, best player on that list. Also making the most money out of that list and will be the toughest to trade for out of everybody there, but a dynamic scorer on the wing who has height, has length, super athletic. He's been in the dunk contest, and he shoots for his career usually close to 40% from 3, at 36% this year, but putting up over 20 points a game. He's a great defender. This will be a tough trade to pull off, both reaching that salary and also getting enough value to trade for him, but that's why he's a dream target. I'm also not so sure the Pelicans will want to deal Trey Murphy either, as they could certainly view him as a part of their long-term core. They did just sign him to an extension, but there's been some rumors around Trey Murphy. Herb Jones as well, also on the Pelicans. Doesn't cost quite as much salary-wise, won't cost quite as much in a trade. Obviously not putting up the same numbers, not the same score, or the same player, quite frankly, that a Trey Murphy is, but a better defender. Herb Jones, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league that not a lot of people talk about. And although he's not having a great year offensively, at his best, he was a 40% three-point shooter. I think that's still in there, and he's still pretty young at 27 years old. And again, that about $14 million salary, a little bit easier to reach. And then a little bit below both of these guys, but I think still an underrated player, is Tari Eason. Now, Tari Eason's been dealing with a little bit of an injury. He hasn't played a whole lot of games. I believe just 11 games played on the year for him. But a younger target, just 24 years old, 6'8", an expiring contract at $5.6 million. So again, not a whole lot of money you have to make up. And before he got hurt, shooting over 50% from three. Obviously not sustainable, but that typical 3-and-D wing. Look, Houston's loaded right now, and is Tari Eason in their long-term plans? I don't think so. I don't think they want to have to pay him with how much they're paying some of their other guys. So could you get a Tari Eason, who'd be a perfect fit for the Sixers at that 4 spot? So those are really my dream targets. If you can get any of those 3 guys, again, that would be just an absolute win. Now let's get to some other notable names, not quite as high on my priority list for Philadelphia, but guys we could see move that I could see the Sixers possibly having interest in. Bobby Portis of the Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously, Milwaukee's going through a whole lot right now. Derek Jones of the Clippers. Clippers as well, just really having a rough go at it. Najee Marshall of the Dallas Mavericks. Keon Ellis of the Sacramento Kings. And Ayo Dosunmu of the Chicago Bulls. Let's focus in on just a couple of those guys there. Bobby Portis. You know, this is an interesting name. I mentioned the Sixers needing size, and Bobby Portis gives you a little bit of that at 6'9", 260, while also being able to stretch the floor. Now, not a very great defender. Not playing a whole lot of minutes this year for Milwaukee, but been pretty effective when he is. Be interesting to see what Milwaukee does, right? Do they want to sell? Do they want to buy to try to convince Giannis to stay? We'll really have to see what direction they end up going in. But if they are selling, if it doesn't cost too much, Bobby Portis could be an intriguing fit, given his offensive skill set here in Philadelphia. And then I talked about Keon Ellis before as well, a guy that I know people are going to say, not another guard, not another small guard, but he brings you a different skill set with his tenacity on the defensive end of the floor, while also shooting almost 40% from three. So you want to talk about a guy that can add some perimeter defense, like I mentioned, as a big need for the Sixers. Keon Ellis can definitely do that. And then we'll get to some sort of more under-the-radar players, guys that not everybody might be 100% familiar with, but if you want to make a small move, a move on the margins, I think one of these 5 guys could make sense. Yves Missi, center for the Pelicans. Jay Huff, center for the Pacers. Haywood Highsmith of the Brooklyn Nets. And then Gigi Jackson and Jalen Wells of the Memphis Grizzlies. For Yves Missi, they have Derek Queen over there in New Orleans. He seems expendable. Jay Huff's an underrated option. Indiana, obviously not having a very good season. They're looking to make some moves. Haywood Highsmith, I don't think has played this year at all for the Brooklyn Nets, but a player who was good on some good teams with the Miami Heat. I really, though, want to focus in on Gigi Jackson and Jalen Wells. And coming up, we're going to look at this trade idea that, see the title of the video, I think the Sixers should make this trade involving these 2 guys right here. But before we get to that, I want to hear from all of you on the show. Want to hear all your voices and your opinions. Who is your favorite Sixers trade target right now? It could be somebody that I mentioned here on today's show. It could be somebody I didn't mention. Let me know. Let's have a good conversation. I'll be down there in the comments responding to every single comment. So get down in there. Let me know who your favorite trade target for Philadelphia specifically is. And before we get there, really quickly, I want to tell you guys about a great deal here on this 76ers Coaches City Edition pullover, a Nike dry fit material, a very, very awesome pullover to own. And given that it's the holiday season now, perfect time to take advantage of a great deal. If you go to chatsports.com/city pullover, you see that right below me. That link will be in the comments and description of the show as well. You can get this item down from $80 to $60 if you use that link, chatsports.com/city pullover, and use the code Prancer at checkout. Again, chatsports.com/city pullover. Use the code Prancer at checkout. You'll get $20 off the City Edition pullover zip up. All right, let's get to this trade idea. So I saw this in an article from Bleacher Report, and I hadn't really thought about a deal quite like this, but it really got me thinking about, the possibility of trading Jared McCain, his value, but I also hadn't really heard either Jalen Wells or Gigi Jackson in a whole lot of rumors, especially involving the Sixers. It's a real simple trade. Sixers get Jalen Wells and Gigi Jackson, two young forwards from the Grizzlies, in exchange for Jared McCain straight up. Now, we'll talk about the two players the Sixers are receiving in this deal, but first, I want to talk about Jared McCain because I know a lot of people are already going to be down in the comment section telling me, we can't trade McCain, we can't trade McCain. Look, I don't want to trade Jared McCain. I would love to keep McCain around. I'm not out here searching for moves to be made to ship out Jared McCain. But if the Sixers want to make a legitimate upgrade and a legitimate move to bolster this roster come this trade deadline, I think they're going to have to throw in McCain as a young player who still has some value. And look, McCain hasn't played all that well this season. Now he's coming off the injury, coming off the surgery. Obviously, you got to give him some time to get back up to speed. We knew he was going to get off to a slower start. But you have Maxey, you have VJ Edgecombe. I think you want Quentin Grimes long term. Where does he fit into all of this? He's had a tough time staying on the floor at times, gaining Nick Nurse's full trust, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So I think out of all the young, talented assets with some real trade value you could have on this roster, I think McCain makes the most sense for someone that could be traded. So again, I don't 100% want to move him. I'm not saying the Sixers need to trade McCain, but man, a trade like this I do really like, and I'll explain why here in a second. We take a look first at McCain's numbers. As I mentioned, slow start, 36% from the field, 33 from three. There's been flashes, no doubt. There's been moments, and I think back to that one game against the Brooklyn Nets where you do see that version of Jared McCain from last year, but for the large part of the season, we just haven't seen the same guy. And so, it does beg the question, can he get back to being that player? It's not a guarantee. I think he will, but it's not a guarantee. So you trade him for two intriguing players here in Jalen Wells and Gigi Jackson. Some of you may not be familiar with these guys. You might be yelling at me right now saying, what are we doing trading for these two random players for Jared McCain? It is a no-go. Let me tell you, Jalen Wells, he's no doubt played better this year than Jared McCain and was one of the best rookies in last year's class. He's a second-year player, was a second-round pick in Jared McCain's draft as well, ended up making all-rookie first team last year. And this year, got off to a little bit of a slow start, but he's really picked it up, averaging over 12 points a game, shooting 44 from the field, 36 from three. He's only 22 years old and only making $1.9 million. He's cheap, under team control for a few more seasons, and a player that I think would fit Philadelphia perfectly because he's also very good on the defensive end, which Jared McCain is not. Could be a better fit with Jalen Wells at 6'8", 206 with a long wingspan, more athletic. Probably just a better fit for what the Sixers want to do as opposed to Jared McCain, who, a little bit of a different skill set. Now, last year in his all-rookie first-team season, in what was a down rookie class, Wells put up good numbers. And again, he didn't play the entire season, right? He wasn't in there the entire year playing all these big minutes until the Grizzlies found out how good he was. But to put up over 10 points a game, 42 from the field, 35 from three, and he had some big explosive games before he did get injured. I believe he broke his wrist down the stretch of last season. But this year, it's been impressive how he's been able to stack good games on top of good games. In October, wasn't all that good. November, you see the numbers go up a little bit. And then in December, these 5 games so far where the Grizzlies have been winning some more basketball games, putting up over 17 a game, while shooting ridiculously efficiently from the field in these 5 games in December. Obviously, a small sample size, but a player that, it's not like you're training for someone and you're like, oh, we already know what this guy is. He's a decent player. Wells is still super young. And a guy that, look, I'm not sure if the Grizzlies would want to trade him, but you're sending a guy back like a Jared McCain, I think that'd be pretty intriguing, right? And with Wells' skill set, again, what he can bring on the defensive side of the floor will be maybe a better fit off the ball than Jared McCain with more size. This is the prize of this trade. We'll get to Gigi Jackson here in just a moment. But Jalen Wells is a really good player. Jalen Wells is a dog. Go watch some of his tape. If you are not familiar with him, I think you'd fall in love with the player he is. He'd be a great fit for what this Sixers team wants to do. But it's not just him, because I don't think I would do straight up Jalen Wells for Jared McCain. I am intrigued by the addition of GG Jackson in this deal. He's a third-year player who had a phenomenal rookie season, then has just dealt with injury after injury after injury the past couple of years, but still only 20 years old. Has a ton of skill, though. Was a very highly recruited player coming out of high school, someone that a lot of draft nerds and draft experts really loved going into the draft a few years back at 6'9", 210, only making $2 million. The stats this year obviously aren't great. He's only played, I think, 8 games, spent some time in the G League, still rehabbing from injuries. The big one, he had a broken bone in his foot, I believe, similar to what Ben Simmons had back a few years ago, and just kind of dealt with different injuries here and there. So, yes, it is a risk for an injury-prone player, but again, only 20 years old. He made all-rookie second team back in his rookie season and put up some pretty spectacular numbers while he was doing so. GG Jackson back in the 2023-24 season put up over 14 points and 4 rebounds a night while shooting decently from the field. You'll take that kind of efficiency from a rookie. Now, again, we haven't really seen that in the past few years because he has been super injured. But he showed flashes, man, that rookie season of being a good player who could score with the ball in his hands, score without the ball in his hands, super athletic with size at 6'9", be a really disruptive defender as well. A guy who I think could be a really high-end starter in this league if he does reach his potential. But again, you got to be on the floor to reach your potential. I know Sixers fans know all about all these injury concerns. His rookie year played 48 games, started 18. Then last year, only 29 games, started 3. This year, only played 8 games. So it's tough, but I think the idea of what he could be, given that again, in his third year, but still only 20 years old, was super young coming into the league. A lot of upside there. Someone that I think, if you get him and Wells in this deal, I think the Sixers should pull the trigger on that trade. Of course, theoretically, if it were on the table from Memphis. But of course, I want to hear what you guys have to say. So get down in the comment section right now. I want to hear from y'all. Would you make this trade? Give me an A for accept, D for decline. Giving up Jared McCain, getting back Jalen Wells and GG Jackson. Embrace debate, and of course, you can leave your thoughts on it as well after if you would accept or decline down there in the comment section. All right, that'll do it. A little bit of a longer one here today, but with trade season now in full swing, really wanted to give you guys a full preview on some names to expect and different things the Sixers could do come the trade deadline, because trades could start happening as soon as this very moment. You just never know. Also, if you want to stay up to date on everything going on with the Sixers, of course, hit that sub button right here, but also give me a follow on social media. I'm on Instagram at 76ersNow IG. That is the page for the channel. And then my personal Twitter as well at Jake Chipper.